The quiet of the city street was shattered by the roar of engines. One moment, the street was empty. The next, a pack of bikers rumbled into view, leather jackets gleaming under the dim glow of streetlights. Their motorcycles vibrated the pavement, each rev echoing like a threat. Keanu Reeves, walking calmly down the sidewalk, stopped for a moment, observing the chaos around him. "Hey, slowpoke, think you can just stroll here?" One biker sneered, stepping off his bike. His boots clacked on the pavement as he closed in, tattoos glinting in the streetlight. The others laughed, circling Keanu like predators, their engines growling, chains rattling. The smell of exhaust and leather filled the air. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't clench his fists. He simply adjusted his jacket and kept his eyes on the bikers, assessing every movement, every twitch, every micro-expression. What they didn't know, and what they would soon discover, was that behind his calm, unassuming exterior was a man trained, disciplined, and lethal, a black belt in karate, ready to defend himself if provoked. One biker cracked his knuckles, laughing arrogantly. "You look like you wouldn't last a second," he said, leaning forward. The others joined in, their jeers growing louder, echoing down the narrow street. Pedestrians nearby froze, some watching from a distance, some ducking into shop doorways, sensing the brewing tension. Keanu's voice, quiet yet firm, cut through the noise. "I'm not looking for trouble, but don't mistake calm for weakness." The bikers sneered at the warning, mistaking it for bluff. They revved their engines again, circling closer. The tension in the air was palpable, like a coiled spring ready to snap. Every observer could feel it. This confrontation could explode in seconds, one wrong move away from chaos. But Keanu's posture never changed. Hands relaxed at his sides, eyes steady, breathing calm. He exuded a presence that made intimidation irrelevant. It wasn't anger that would neutralize the threat. It was skill, patience, and absolute control over his own reactions. And in that tense moment, the bikers, brash and arrogant, were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. Never underestimate someone based on appearance, because the quietest person often holds the greatest power. The street stretched narrow and dimly lit, lined with flickering neon signs and shuttered shopfronts. The night air carried the scent of gasoline and asphalt, punctuated by the occasional distant siren. Keanu Reeves walked steadily, unhurried, his steps deliberate and quiet. There was no entourage, no flashy cars, no announcement of his presence. Just a man moving through the city with calm, understated confidence. In stark contrast, the bikers were chaos personified. Leather jackets creaked as they shifted on their bikes, their helmets glinting in the neon lights. Chains rattled from belts and handlebars, and their engines growled like wild animals. Every movement they made was meant to intimidate, to assert dominance over the quiet figure in front of them. One biker spat onto the street, sneered, and revved his engine, sending a low, threatening rumble down the block. The difference between the two parties could not have been more pronounced. The bikers relied on volume, aggression, and sheer presence to command fear. Their movements were loud, brash, and exaggerated, gestures meant to display power they believed they held. Keanu, however, exuded a different kind of authority. His calm posture, relaxed hands, and steady gaze made it clear that he was not intimidated, and he did not need to rely on noise or theatrics to assert control. One biker cracked his knuckles and leaned forward, sneering. "You think standing there like a statue will save you?" His companions laughed, circling closer, revving engines, and creating a tense barrier around Keanu. Pedestrians had stopped their evening routines, ducking into doorways or pausing to observe the unfolding standoff. The energy in the street was electric, a collision of arrogance and quiet resolve. Keanu's eyes scanned the bikers, taking in every detail, the slight hesitation in one shoulder, the way another shifted weight on his foot, the subtle cues that revealed overconfidence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture aggressively. He only assessed, calculated, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation, not with anger, but with precision and skill. "Gentlemen," Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm but commanding. "I'm not looking for trouble, but I will defend myself if I need to." The words were soft but carried weight. Unlike the biker's aggressive posturing, his authority came from confidence, control, and discipline. The contrast was almost palpable. Loud versus silent, arrogance versus composure, intimidation versus mastery. The bikers mistook his calm for weakness. They revved their engines louder, encircling him like sharks, confident that this man would fold under pressure. One even leaned menacingly closer, smirking, trying to provoke a reaction. The tension tightened. The crowd held its collective breath, and the city seemed to pause. Keanu didn't move impulsively. He didn't escalate. His black belt training had taught him one thing above all. True power is controlled, precise, and calm under pressure. The biker's aggression was hot and chaotic. Keanu's presence was cool, deliberate, and commanding. The stage was set, the contrast clear, and the audience, both on the street and those who would later hear the story, could sense that the next moment would determine the outcome of the confrontation. Every passerby could feel the electricity in the air, the silent tension between chaos and composure. The bikers were about to learn a lesson they had never anticipated. Appearances can deceive, and underestimating calm skill can be a grave mistake. The narrow street crackled with energy, every rev of a motorcycle sending vibrations through the pavement. The bikers closed in, circling Keanu Reeves with grins that barely masked their anticipation. Engines growled, chains rattled, and the occasional roar echoed off the nearby buildings. It was a show of raw intimidation, designed to provoke fear, but Keanu's calm remained unshaken. "Step aside, old man." One biker sneered, leaning on his bike. The others laughed, egging him on, confident that his threats were enough to bend anyone. They underestimated one thing entirely. Keanu was not just calm. He was trained. A black belt in karate, honed through years of discipline, patience, and precision. Keanu's eyes scanned each biker methodically. He noticed the subtle tells that betrayed overconfidence. A shifting shoulder, a slight smirk, a foot tapping impatiently. His hands remained relaxed, but his body was coiled, ready to act with absolute precision. He didn't flinch at the engine's roar, didn't tense at the menacing gestures. He was fully in control of both his mind and his body. The bikers, emboldened by their numbers, advanced. One of them swung a fist toward Keanu, testing his reaction. In an instant, Keanu moved, not violently, not in rage, but with effortless skill and precision. A single step, a subtle pivot, and the biker was off balance, stumbling backward without injury. The street seemed to hold its breath. The other bikers froze, eyes wide in disbelief. Their confidence evaporated in a heartbeat. They had expected fear, panic, or a defensive flail. Instead, they saw calm control, mastery, and the unmistakable presence of someone who could neutralize a threat with minimal effort. "Easy there," Keanu said quietly, his voice firm but composed. "This doesn't have to get messy." But his words carried authority beyond tone. They reflected skill, awareness, and quiet dominance. The bikers' bravado faltered. Their laughter died in their throats, replaced by tension and uncertainty. One biker revved his engine, trying to regain control of the narrative. But Keanu anticipated every movement. A swift sidestep, a subtle deflection, and the biker's balance was compromised once more. Another lunged forward, thinking he could overpower him by surprise, only to be stopped mid-motion by a controlled block that sent him staggering. Pedestrians watched, some stepping back in awe, others capturing the moment on their phones. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Is that Keanu Reeves? He's a black belt." The bikers themselves began exchanging nervous glances, realizing that their earlier confidence had been a grave misjudgment. Keanu's movements were minimal but effective. Each adjustment, each step, each defensive motion communicated a single truth. He was in complete control. Aggression would not dictate the outcome. Skill and composure would. The bikers, now shaken, tried to regroup, but hesitation had already taken root. One misstep could cost them their pride, or worse. The street, once dominated by engines, laughter, and threats, now resonated with tense anticipation and silent awe. Every biker sensed a shift in power. Every witness understood the lesson unfolding in real time. Keanu Reeves had transformed what could have been chaos into a demonstration of discipline, skill, and authority without violence. And in that charged moment, The bikers realized their arrogance had blinded them. They had underestimated calm, precision, and mastery, qualities far more powerful than intimidation, brute force, or numbers. The tension peaked. One biker, the ringleader, took a tentative step back, eyes wide, and whispered under his breath, We messed up." Keanu's stance never wavered. His calm gaze, steady breathing, and controlled posture communicated a single, unspoken message: respect skill, or face consequences you cannot predict. The street was silent, but the air was electric, thick with disbelief and tension. Pedestrians who had frozen moments ago now stepped back, whispering to each other in awe. Some raised their phones, not to call for help, but to record a scene that seemed almost unreal. Keanu Reeves, calm, composed, and precise, had just neutralized a biker gang without a single shout or reckless move. The bikers themselves were in shock. Their previous bravado, the laughter, the revving engines, the confident swagger, had evaporated in seconds. They stumbled, shifted, and exchanged nervous glances, their earlier certainty replaced by fear and uncertainty. One of them even backed away instinctively, gripping his handlebars tighter, as if the very act of holding onto his bike might provide some protection against the calm storm in front of him. The leader of the gang, a tall man with tattoos running up both arms and a leather jacket stretched tight over his chest, froze completely. His smirk was gone, replaced by a pale realization that he had underestimated the man in front of him. His eyes darted between his crew and Keanu, searching for some kind of explanation, some loophole that could explain away the fact that a single man had so effortlessly dismantled their intimidation tactics. Pedestrians continued to whisper, some audibly gasping. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" one student asked, holding a phone at arm's length to capture the scene. "He's a black belt," another muttered, eyes wide. The realization spread like wildfire. The man they had assumed would be an easy target was, in fact, a master of martial arts and control, capable of neutralizing threats with minimal effort. Even the bikers' demeanor changed subtly. They had come expecting to dominate, to assert power through intimidation and sheer numbers. But in that moment, every action they had taken seemed foolish and unnecessary. They began to second-guess every decision they had made in approaching him. The leader attempted to regain control, revving his engine again and motioning to his gang, but hesitation now crept into every movement. One wrong step, one misjudged motion, could result in another public defeat, and they knew it. Keanu remained perfectly still, hands relaxed, gaze steady. There was no aggression in his posture, no sign of arrogance, no hint that he sought to humiliate or dominate. Yet every subtle movement, every controlled shift of weight, communicated authority. The crowd felt it instantly. The difference between chaos and control had never been so clear. Nearby shopkeepers peeked from behind shutters, eyes wide, murmuring under their breath about the spectacle. Students, workers, and late-night wanderers collectively absorbed the lesson being delivered silently in front of them. Skill and composure outweigh aggression and numbers every time. One biker, the youngest of the group, attempted a sarcastic laugh, but it faltered halfway, his confidence shattered. Another started speaking, trying to regain the group's bravado, but his words were hollow, lacking the conviction they had moments before. The energy of the gang had shifted irreversibly. The fight had left their hands, and the respect of the street belonged to the man standing calm in the center. Pedestrians started inching closer, phones recording every moment, faces reflecting awe and disbelief. "I can't believe it," one whispered. They thought they were tough, but he didn't even fight. He just controlled everything. The murmurs rippled through the crowd, creating a silent chorus of recognition. Even the leader of the gang, once so cocky, took a hesitant step back. His hands gripped his handlebars, knuckles white. The realization had sunk in. He had been thoroughly outclassed, not through rage, not through brute force, but through calm precision and disciplined skill. Keanu didn't raise his voice, didn't gesture aggressively, didn't revel in victory. Yet the street, the bikers, and the pedestrians all understood the same truth. This man commanded respect through mastery, not menace. And the moment was etched indelibly in the minds of everyone present. As the engines idled quietly, the bikers glanced at each other nervously, a silent understanding passing between them. The fight they thought they could win had already been lost. They had underestimated calm, patience, and skill, and that was a mistake they would never make again. The street, once dominated by the roar of engines and laughter, now resonated with awe, tension, and reflection. Pedestrians, bikers, and even shopkeepers recognized it. Power is not always loud. Authority is not always violent. Respect is earned through skill, composure, and control. In that suspended moment, everyone watching understood it. The lesson of the street, delivered silently by a man in a black belt. Never underestimate calm confidence, and never misjudge the quiet ones. The street, once dominated by the bikers' roaring engines and aggressive posturing, had fallen into an uneasy silence. Pedestrians hovered at the edges of the scene, phones raised, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming legendary. The bikers' initial confidence had evaporated entirely, replaced by confusion, fear, and an unmistakable sense of defeat. Keanu Reeves stood at the center of it all, calm, composed, and immovable. His eyes scanned the gang with quiet precision. Each biker who had tried to intimidate him had already been subtly neutralized by his swift, controlled movements. One biker staggered as he attempted to step forward, another hesitated mid-lunge, and yet another realized that his attempt at aggression had been preempted with effortless skill. The leader of the gang, tall and tattooed, tried to rally his crew, shouting over the lingering hum of engines. "Come on, let's finish this. Don't let him." But his words faltered as he met Keanu's calm, unblinking gaze. In that instant, the leader understood the truth. This was not a bluff, and this man was not to be underestimated. Keanu shifted subtly. A pivot here, a slight step there, small, measured motions that conveyed control without aggression. One biker attempted a feint, thinking he could regain dominance through a quick strike. In response, Keanu sidestepped smoothly, using the biker's own momentum to off-balance him. The man stumbled, barely managing to regain footing, his confidence eroding with every second. The biker's laughter had long since vanished. Instead, nervous whispers filled the gaps between revving engines. He's a black belt. I've never seen anyone move like that. We're in over our heads." Even the youngest biker, who had tried to mock Keanu earlier, now lowered his eyes, recognizing that the man before them was in complete control of the situation without raising a fist in anger. Pedestrians, once terrified, began inching closer, their awe palpable. Cameras flashed, capturing the disciplined poise of a man who could have fought aggressively but chose restraint instead. The energy of the street shifted from fear to respect. Everyone watching realized a simple truth. Dominance isn't about force. It's about mastery, composure, and presence. The gang leader finally took a cautious step back, voice trembling. Okay, you win. You're dangerous." His crew mirrored his actions, each biker retreating slightly, some even lowering their hands from grips on handlebars. Their earlier intimidation tactics now seemed foolish, naive, and reckless. Keanu's response was quiet, deliberate, and commanding. "Threaten someone again, and it won't end well. You have a choice. Walk away or face consequences." He didn't need to raise his voice, flex his muscles, or show anger. His controlled presence alone communicated the authority that brute force could not. The bikers, fully aware that they had misjudged him, began backing away. Engines idled nervously, chains rattled as they mounted their bikes, and the leader gave one last, shaky glance toward Keanu before leading his retreat. There was no fight, no chaos, only the undeniable lesson that underestimating someone based on calmness or appearance is a grave mistake. Pedestrians started to exhale collectively, whispering to each other, replaying the events in their minds. "Did you see that? He didn't even throw a punch, and they're retreating," one said. "Skill over aggression. That's incredible," another added. The crowd understood that what had just unfolded was not just a confrontation. It was a masterclass in discipline, control, and respect. Even the street itself seemed to acknowledge the shift. Neon lights reflected off wet asphalt, the hum of city life returning slowly. The bikers, who had come with arrogance and loud threats, were now humbled. Pedestrians, who had once feared the encounter, now carried a sense of awe. and Keanu Reeves, as composed as ever, adjusted his jacket, took a calm step forward, and walked down the street, his authority fully established, his lesson silently delivered. In that moment, the bikers realized something they could never unlearn. Power is not an intimidation. Respect is earned through mastery, composure, and presence. And the street, the witnesses, and anyone who would later hear the story would remember this encounter as a moment where calm skill triumphed over chaotic aggression, leaving everyone in awe of the quiet authority of a black belt. The tension that had gripped the street moments before had finally dissipated, leaving behind an almost reverent quiet. The bikers, once brimming with arrogance and aggression, had retreated, their engines now idling hesitantly as they regrouped further down the block. Their confidence shattered, they looked back nervously, fully aware that the man they had threatened had demonstrated not just skill, but absolute control under pressure. Pedestrians began to step forward from their hiding places, murmuring in awe. Students who had initially frozen in fear now whispered excitedly to one another, replaying the scene over and over. "Did you see that? He didn't even throw a real punch. He just moved and they couldn't touch him." Phones still hovered in hands, capturing slow-motion replays of the subtle, precise movements that had neutralized the threat. Even the shopkeepers, who had peeked from behind shutters and store fronts, began to exchange incredulous glances. The lesson on the street had been delivered quietly but unmistakably. True power isn't loud, flashy, or fueled by aggression. It's calm, controlled, and disciplined. Keanu Reeves remained composed, walking slowly and deliberately down the sidewalk. His posture was relaxed, yet commanding, his gaze steady, absorbing the reactions of the people around him without arrogance. He hadn't needed to shout, threaten, or escalate. Every motion he made had conveyed authority, and the street, once tense with fear and chaos, had absorbed the transformation. Calm mastery had prevailed over reckless aggression. The bikers, meanwhile, had regrouped at a safe distance, glancing back repeatedly. They whispered among themselves, voices shaky and subdued. The leader, still pale and visibly shaken, muttered, "We underestimated him. Completely." His crew nodded silently, recognizing that they had been humiliated not by force, but by the quiet authority and precise skill of one man. The crowd of onlookers slowly began to disperse, yet the lesson lingered. Conversations buzzed quietly. Even when someone seems calm, they might be far more capable than you think. Skill and composure beat aggression every time. You can't intimidate someone who's prepared and disciplined. The whispers carried a sense of awe and reflection, as if the entire street had internalized the encounter as a moral teaching rather than just a spectacle. Pedestrians who had originally feared being caught in the crossfire now would discuss the encounter animatedly. Some speculated about Keanu's training, others about the mindset required to stay so composed in a high-stakes situation. Everyone agreed on one thing: underestimating quiet confidence is a mistake no one wants to repeat. Even the atmosphere of the street itself seemed to settle differently. The flickering neon lights reflected off the wet asphalt, casting long, deliberate shadows that mirrored the calm authority of the man who had just walked through the chaos. Cars and motorcycles passed by, yet the energy of the encounter lingered, a subtle hum of respect embedded in the night. Keanu Reeves, now several steps ahead, glanced briefly over his shoulder. His calm gaze met the eyes of those who had witnessed the confrontation, conveying a silent acknowledgement. The lesson had been delivered, and it would not be forgotten. He continued walking, unhurried, unshaken, leaving behind a street transformed, not by violence, but by discipline, composure, and quiet mastery. The bikers' retreat, the pedestrians' awe, and the lingering energy of the street made one thing clear. True authority isn't about intimidation or aggression. It's about presence, skill, and control under pressure. And for everyone who had been there, or would later hear the story, the lesson was unforgettable. The calmest man in the street had turned a potentially dangerous confrontation into a demonstration of absolute mastery, and the moral was simple yet profound. Respect and discipline are far more powerful than fear or numbers. The street had finally returned to its normal rhythm. Pedestrians had resumed their evening routines. The distant hum of traffic filled the air, and the neon lights reflected softly on the wet asphalt. But for anyone who had witnessed what had unfolded just moments ago, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. They had seen a moment that transcended ordinary confrontation, a moment where calm composure, mastery, and integrity triumphed over aggression, arrogance, and chaos. Keanu Reeves had walked through a gauntlet of intimidation, surrounded by bikers who believed sheer numbers and loud threats could control any situation. But his response had been simple: observe, assess, and act with precision. He didn't shout. He didn't escalate. He didn't need to. His calm presence alone had dismantled the gang's bravado, neutralized their aggression, and restored order without a single reckless strike. For the bikers, the lesson was humbling. They had assumed dominance based on numbers and noise, only to realize that skill, discipline, and composure outweighed their intimidation tactics. Their laughter, once bold and mocking, had been replaced by hesitant whispers and nervous glances. Even their leader, who had seemed invincible at the start, had been forced to step back and acknowledge the truth. Underestimating calm authority is a costly mistake. The onlookers, meanwhile, were transformed not by fear, but by awe. Students, shopkeepers, and late-night pedestrians had witnessed a rare demonstration of control under pressure. Phones recorded every precise movement, every subtle shift of balance, and every understated gesture that conveyed authority. Yet what lingered most was not the action itself. It was the lesson beneath the action. True power isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, and it doesn't demand respect. True power commands it effortlessly through presence, skill, and integrity. This encounter was more than just a celebrity story. It was a universal lesson. Life often presents situations where aggression, intimidation, or fear seems dominant. But those who respond with composure, clarity, and skill, not force, often gain the upper hand. Keanu's actions reminded everyone watching that the quiet ones, the disciplined ones, the ones who master themselves, are often the strongest of all. Type respect if you believe calm skill is stronger than aggression. Comment below. How would you react if someone tried to intimidate you in real life? The street itself seemed to echo the moral. The bikers had left, the pedestrians dispersed, yet the energy of what had occurred lingered. Neon lights reflected like beacons of clarity, casting long shadows that reminded everyone. Discipline and presence leave a mark far longer than anger and force ever could. Keanu's walk down the street, calm and composed, became more than a retreat. It was a demonstration of mastery. Each step reinforced the lesson for everyone who had been present. Confrontations don't have to escalate to prove authority. Confidence, control, and expertise communicate far more than aggression ever could. And for viewers at home, the takeaway is clear. Respect is earned, not demanded. Arrogance may intimidate briefly, but composure, skill, and integrity endure. Situations that seem dangerous or chaotic can be neutralized with a calm mind and steady hands, proving that true authority comes from within, not from loudness or numbers. Moments like these are why people return to stories like this again and again. They inspire, they teach, and they remind us of a timeless truth. Never underestimate someone who appears quiet, because beneath calmness often lies extraordinary skill and wisdom. In the end, the street was silent. The lesson lingered. The bikers had learned humility. The pedestrians had witnessed mastery. And Keanu Reeves had walked away, leaving behind a blueprint for respect, authority, and the quiet power of composure. One that would echo far beyond that city street and long after the cameras stopped recording.